What's going on, y'all? Another random topic for you. Today's topic is called My Friends Studied People, I Studied Life. Now, you may ask, what does that mean? It just means that, growing up, my friends seemed more interested in the behavior of other human beings, learning how to maneuver within that, where I was more worried about more philosophical things. Why are we here? What is our purpose? How do humans and their environment, how do we coexist with our environment? How do we coexist with animals? How do we coexist with each other? I wasn't necessarily worried about how do I maneuver through this situation? How do I handle this specific situation with this person? How do people deal with things in this situation? Whereas those are the things my friends always seem to be worried about. They always seem to be telling me, oh, this is not how people do things. People don't do things that way, Kai. And I was like, man, I just brush them off like, man, whatever. I could definitely say I was always considered like, I guess, a strange person or a weird person. I never personally felt that way. I honestly felt like everybody else was weird. Just in the way we handle things, just in the way, like I said, my friends would seem more interested in following along with what everyone else was doing. I was more interested in whatever I feel in my heart is true, whatever I feel is right, that's what it was. I had my own morality. I had my own code or creed that I live by, whereas my friends, they seem to follow along with what everybody else thought was right, with what society thought was right. I didn't see nothing wrong with that. I'm like, hey, I live my way, y'all live your way. But they always seem to want to tell me that, oh, well, that I was strange or I was weird. And, it never was to a point where I was overwhelmed by it, but it was just something that always was on my mind, something that I always thought about. When I was younger, I pretty much just ignored it. The older I got, I started thinking more and more. I'm like, why do they say these things? Why does it matter that I have my own way of seeing the world versus y'all way of seeing the world? I didn't see nothing wrong with that. Like, basically, I really didn't know why they cared. It was always, oh, people don't do this, people don't do that. And I'm just like, oh my God, here these motherfuckers go again. I view them as being followers. They view me as like the black sheep. Growing up, even though I feel like I've always been more of an optimistic person, there was times when it got to me, and I'm just like, man, like why do they even care? Why do they constantly feel the need to remind me of me being weird or whatever the case may be? I remember my mom took me to see this movie, A Beautiful Mind, and that was always one of my favorite movies. Movie about a genius, kind of the same as me. It was like, even among the other geniuses, he was like the black sheep. He had some issues fitting in with everybody else, and he just rather hang out by himself. We didn't realize until later on in the movie that his one friend that he would always hang with was actually a figment of his imagination. That's the one part where we differ. I didn't have any, there was no one that I truly believed, I didn't have an imaginary friend who I spoke to all the time or thought was real. But I'm not gonna lie, I did talk to myself. And me talking to myself is pretty much the same thing I'm doing now, except now I have a camera in my face. Or me talking to myself was more so always philosophizing, if that's a word. It was just me looking at the world. And I kind of was somebody who would create like these characters, or I would create my own world, so to speak, without trying to sound too weird. I had a very active imagination. My imagination was just always running wild with these different scenarios where I had these characters. But the difference between me and the character in the movie, I knew it was fake. I knew it was just my imagination. But I enjoyed creating them. That's why I feel like I enjoy writing so much now. That's why when I started writing like movie scripts, it was like second nature. This is just what I've always been doing. Creating these characters in my head, creating like lives for them. Basically storylines for these characters. I never thought they was real. I never did it around other people. I was always somebody who would always get caught talking to myself at various times. People would be looking at me like, what the fuck is wrong with that guy? But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, with my friends studying other people and then me studying life, they became popular based on their studies. They learned how to maneuver through people extremely well. Me, not so much. But on the other side of things, I became a philosopher. I started looking at the world, eventually looking at myself, and I was always very introspective. I viewed things more as my perspective, me versus the world, in a sense. They looked at themselves as themselves in the crowd. This pretty much continued all the way into adulthood, mid-20s. That's when I would say that I started to fully mature. But the funny thing about that is, once we started to fully mature, I found that the two of us started moving in opposite directions. Whereas the older I got, the less I started looking at the world, the more I started looking at other people and how I fit into that. How do I maneuver through that? Because now, as a more mature adult, as somebody who's an artist, now also a business owner, somebody with my own business, an entrepreneur, now I have to figure out how to get my art to these same people I've been ignoring my whole life, which obviously is a very difficult thing. I started reading things like 48 Laws of Power, a lot of different self-help books, psychology books. I've always been interested in psychology. Anything that has to do with the mind. I read a bunch of books on all that kind of stuff. So that's what helped me started learning more about how people operate, how they see the world. And the funny thing is, when I first read the 48 Laws of Power, when I finished it, I sat there and I was like, is this what everyone's been doing the whole time? Like, they've been trying to gain power over, or they've been trying to feel more powerful over each other. They've been basically playing these power games. And I always thought that was strange. I'm like, I only wanted to have power over myself. That was the only person I cared about having power over. Everyone seemed to, they wanted power in relation to other people. Like, they wanted to feel more powerful in their social group, or in their social structure, in their neighborhood, in their city, in their state, and eventually, I guess, the world. Whereas I was content just having power over myself. As long as I was in control over myself, as long as no one else had the power over me, I was fine with that. If I felt like other people were becoming too controlling or over criticizing me, over analyzing everything I was doing, I just would get away from them. Like, yeah. And that always seemed to piss them off. I'm like, that's strange. These people are treating me bad, but yet the minute I stop hanging out with them, they're upset by that. It's like, so you want me to hang around so you can keep treating me bad. Like, that was always a strange thing to me. So while I was heading in that direction, learning more about people, my friends seemed that once they reached maturity, they started going in the other direction. They start looking more to life. They start becoming philosophers in their own right. Again, I was like, this is odd. I started seeing them, especially on like social media. Everyone's a philosopher on social media. They always want to talk about how people doing this, people doing that. I never got into too much of that. I'll be the person. If you look on my timeline, I probably go weeks, maybe even months sometimes without tweeting anything. It just wasn't much there. But I found it very interesting, and very, I could see that they was growing as well. So a lot of the stuff that maybe some of the little grudges that I was holding against them from when we was younger, I started to let them go because I started to see the same way that I'm always growing and learning new things and learning more about myself and the way I treat other people, they was learning that as well. Even though we was moving in opposite directions, we were all still moving towards maturity, towards becoming fully developed human beings. We just did it different ways. That's something I just really found interesting. Well, I still find interesting. But like I said, there's all these sayings that say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I think I was right when I was younger, when I used to think it doesn't matter how you see the world. It doesn't matter how the next person sees the world. We're all just trying to be happy. We're all trying to live our lives to the fullest. It doesn't matter which journey we take to get there, as long as we get there. That's the only thing that matters. So as long as we put it all together, we start learning how to deal with each other because we have no choice but to deal with each other. We start also thinking about the bigger picture, start thinking about not the petty things that's going on between human beings, but also looking at the world same way we look at ourselves. The world isn't some trash heap that we can just do with, we could just use and throw away whenever we feel like it. This is the only planet we have. Unless we build some technology that allows us to go to other galaxies or other planets and we can survive there, this is the only thing we have. I feel like a lot of human beings, there's a character, I believe it's Fantastic Four, the guy who the Silver Surfer worked for, and that he would just pretty much go to each planet, suck up all the resources, and just move on to the next planet. Leave the planet just dead and desolate with no signs of life and anything. And I feel like even still to this day, human beings, we still do that to our own planet. And until we start seeing the world as philosophers and understanding that we have to look at the world the same way we look at ourselves, the same way you treat your body, that's the same way you treat our earthly body. The world will eventually become a better place. But we all have to go through that journey and learn how to treat each other as brothers and sisters, whether you actually know somebody or not. A lot of people, you walk down the street, people feel uncomfortable speaking to each other. Our own fellow human beings. Everyone's an enemy. Everyone's a stranger. And it shouldn't be like that. So we have to learn how to see the world in relation to other people, as also we have to learn to see the world in relation in a philosophical way. I do think eventually we're going to get there. I don't know where that's going to lead once it all happens, because I do believe that human beings, the majority of us are good people. We don't mean to be assholes. We don't mean to be assholes all the time, but, we're just at certain places in our lives, and it just is what it is. Just got to deal with it the best you can. Like I always say, just my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.